Viewers, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Agora Legis, the platform of legal minds, and here we discuss legal principle and make them easy. We make the law easy for everyone. And especially in today's session, we're going to discuss about the extent of ownership of land. So, rights of ownership above the surface, rights of ownership on the surface, and rights on ownership below the surface of land. So I'm Council Ben, and let's jump right in. Well, when we talk about right above the surface, that means that the owner of a land owns also the surface or the airspace above the land that is he owns. Historically, at common law, it was considered that uh, the owner of a land, he owns land up to the heavens and still up to hell. And it was stated in the Latin maxim saying that cuius est solum, eius est usque, ad coelum et ad inferos. That means that the one who owns land owns it up to the heaven and below up to hell. That is the meaning, the literal meaning of that maxim. However, with time and with development of law, it has been seen that law has to be reasonable, and there has been some exception. However, before we go to the exception, the general rule is that the owner of the land also owns the airspace above the land. And I'm going to take you through this case that uh, showed it clearly that the landowner owns also the airspace above the land. And that will be the landmark case. I guess you already know it, the Kelsen case, Kelsen brothers, Imperial Tobacco, a case reported in 1967. And the facts of the case is that Imperial Tobacco raised side posts that uh, infringed on the airspace of Kelsen's land for by about 4 inches. In some books, it's inches, and in others, it's two. So I urge you to make more research about that. But the side post was infringing on the airspace of Kelsen's land. And when Kelsen sued the company, the court awarded damages, and an injunction was issued because on ground of trespass to land. I'm going also to take you through the case of Gifford versus Dent, a case reported in 1926. And the facts of this case are that the claimant held uh, uh, held a land. However, the defendants had erased a pancard that that infringed in the airspace of the forecourt of the claimant's land. And the claimant suing, the court held that as long as it has infringed on the limit of the airspace of the other, the claimant, it's considered to be trespass to land, and the damages were awarded an injunction. And however, now to the exception, we saw that the height above the airspace has to be reasonable. So you can only own land, okay, you can only own the airspace of your land up to the extent that you can use it. Where you can no longer use it, it's no longer yours. And it has to be a reasonable height. So it was in the case of Bernstein versus Skyview and General Limited, reported in 1978, Queen's Bench on page 479. So in this case, an aircraft was photographing these topographic topographic photos, topographic pictures, and at about 700 feet in the air. And the claimant claimed that that was trespass to his land since it was above the airspace of his land. And But the court held that the height for which someone can claim trespass has to be reasonable and has to be in within the means of a reasonable man, because you won't say that above 700 feet you can still use that land. So it has to be reasonable, and that was the exception. However, now when we go for the land, the right of ownership of land against not against but below the surface, sorry, below the surface of land. Uh, Here we see the general rule is that the owner of a land owns also beneath his land, as we saw in our previous video when we defined land according to the Petroleum Act, Cap 161, that land includes beneath the land, also beneath the surface, beneath the water. And here I will take you through a very interesting case of Ellis versus Brigas, reported in 1866. In this case, it involved a claimant who was a tenant and who found a boat with 6 feet under the water. And the issue in court was whether that boat belonged to the tenant or to the landlord. And the court held that since the landlord is the legal owner of the land, the landlord owned also everything beneath the land. So it was held that the boat belonged to the landlord and not to the tenant. And that actually brings out the fact that a owner of a land also owns beneath, or also owns the space beneath or below the surface. Still in the right of ownership below the surface, I'm going to take you through the right to minerals in land. Uh, Article Article 244, Clause 2 of the Constitution provides that the minerals and minerals ores uh, shall be exploited, taking into account the interest of individual landowner and local government and the government. So to mean that minerals are property of the state and not property of the landowner. So they will be exploited, taking into account the interest, of course, of the individual who owns land, because you cannot just be deprived. It's your right to own your land. However, these are properties, or these are belong to the state. So what I want to bring out here is that when you own your land, if there is any mineral inside there down, you cannot exploit that mineral unless you have substantial permission, or the required permission for that. And the required permission for that is that you either pay some consideration to the government for you to be using or to exploit that mineral, or you be relocated. The government will give you another land. You will be relocated for the government to exploit the land that contains minerals for public interests, because it's an exception under the right of personal property found in Article 26 of the Constitution, the 1995 Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, that you have the right to not to be deprived of your personal property. However, it is a derogable right, since it can be limited. So there are some exceptions, one of them being presented here. And as such, we have seen the right of ownership of land above the airspace, on the surface, and below the surface. I hope you enjoyed the video and the content. I urge you to subscribe, like, and share if you liked and if it's helpful.